I used to believe certainty was a kind of armor. If you wore it long enough, nothing sharp could reach you. I had built my life on that belief, on clean lines and clear labels, and everyone around me seemed to agree it fit. I was engaged to Madeline Brooks, planning a spring wedding, joking with my best friend Ryan Coleman about seating charts and open bars. When people asked who I was, the answer came easily. I didn't hesitate. I didn't doubt. Then Lucas Reed entered the picture, and certainty began to feel like something thinner than I remembered. Lucas joined our team in early autumn, when the city's edges softened and the air carried a restless energy. He wasn't loud or showy. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, he chose words as if they mattered. We worked late the first week he arrived, a deadline pressing us together in a quiet office while the building emptied around us. I noticed the way he paused before answering questions, how his eyes tracked the room as if reading between the walls. It wasn't attraction, not then. It was recognition, the strange pull of someone who seemed to understand without being told. Madeline and I had our rhythms by that point. We moved through weekends efficiently, splitting errands, sharing meals, rehearsing a future that looked good from the outside. She loved me in a steady, practical way, and I loved her back with gratitude and intention. Still, I caught myself saving stories from my day for later, as if waiting for the right audience. When Lucas asked how my weekend went, I told him the truth. When Madeline asked, I gave her the summary that it unsettled me. That difference point one evening, as we packed up after another long day, Lucas mentioned his boyfriend in passing, no drama, no apology, just a fact woven into a sentence. I nodded, said something neutral, and felt a small, inexplicable shift inside my chest. It wasn't disapproval. It was awareness, like a door creaking open in a house I thought I knew by heart. I told myself it meant nothing. People said things all the time that didn't change you. After that, we talked more. Not about work, not always. About books and music and the kind of lives people imagine when no one is watching. Lucas had a way of asking questions that felt gentle but exacting. He didn't pry, he waited. When I spoke, he didn't rush to respond. The space he gave made my words feel heavier, more honest. I began to look forward to those conversations in a way that felt private, even when they happened in plain sight. Ryan noticed before I did. He teased me about my new shadow, joked that I'd found a replacement best friend. I laughed along and dismissed it, but the comment lingered. At home, Madeline asked why I was checking my phone so often. I told her it was work. It wasn't a lie so much as an incomplete truth. The first time I realized I was hiding something, it scared me. I had always thought infidelity announced itself with grand gestures and obvious choices. This was quieter. It was choosing a longer route home so I could finish a conversation. It was deleting messages not because they were inappropriate, but because they felt too intimate to explain. I told myself I was protecting my relationship, that boundaries were flexible as long as no one crossed them. Lucas never crossed them. If anything, he respected them more than I did. When I mentioned my engagement, his expression softened, and he congratulated me without hesitation. He asked about Madeline with genuine curiosity, and I found myself describing her carefully, as if precision could preserve something fragile. The pressure built anyway. It lived in the pauses, in the moments when our eyes met and held a second too long before we both looked away. I began to notice the way he listened to me breathe before I spoke, the way my own voice changed when I said his name. These were small things, easy to dismiss, but they accumulated like interest. One Friday, a sudden system failure forced us to stay late while the rest of the team scattered into the weekend. The city outside the windows darkened, lights blinking on in distant buildings. We ordered takeout and worked side by side in a companionable silence that felt earned. At some point, Lucas leaned back and asked if I was happy. That it was a simple question, and it landed harder than it should have. I answered quickly, listing reasons instead of feelings. He nodded, accepting the answer without comment, and something in me relaxed and tightened all at once. I realized I wanted him to ask again. When we finally shut down our computers, the hour was late and the rain had started, a steady drumming that made leaving feel abrupt. Lucas mentioned his apartment was closer than mine, offered his couch if I didn't want to drive through it. The offer was casual, considerate. I hesitated, thinking of Madeline asleep at home, of the life waiting for me if I said no. That I said yes anyway, telling myself it was practical, that there was nothing dangerous about shelter and conversation. As we stepped into the rain, the city blurred around us, and for the first time since I could remember, the future I'd planned felt less certain than the night unfolding in front of me. Marcus's place was quieter than I expected, tucked into a street that felt deliberately forgotten by the city. The building was modest, clean, and newly occupied, like a thought still settling into shape. When he unlocked the door, he stepped aside, giving me space to enter first. That small courtesy stayed with me longer than it should have. Inside, the apartment smelled faintly of coffee and something woody I couldn't name. The furniture was sparse but intentional, each piece placed with care rather than habit. Marcus watched my reaction without comment, as if the room were an extension of himself and he was waiting to see how I would treat it. "It's peaceful," I said, breaking the silence. "That's what I wanted," Marcus replied. "A place where I don't have to explain myself." The sentence lingered between us. I nodded, understanding more than I could admit. We moved slowly through the space: living room, small kitchen, a window that looked out onto a quiet courtyard. Nothing about the tour felt rushed. Marcus spoke when it mattered and stayed quiet when words would have diluted the moment. That we sat across from each other on opposite ends of the couch, a careful distance that felt both intentional and fragile. Marcus asked about my work, my routines, the things I enjoyed when no one else was watching. I answered honestly, surprising myself with how easily the truth came. He listened without interruption, his attention steady, encouraging. "You hide a lot," Marcus said after a while, not accusing, just observant. "I learned to," I replied. "It keeps things simpler." "For who?" he asked. The question struck deeper than I expected. I didn't answer right away. Outside, someone laughed, the sound drifting in and out through the open window, a reminder that the world kept moving even when my thoughts stalled. Marcus spoke again, this time about himself. About leaving home, about learning new rules in unfamiliar places, about the quiet exhaustion of always being seen as something before being seen as a person. His words weren't dramatic, but they carried weight. I recognized the loneliness beneath them, the careful way he chose what to share. "I don't like pretending," Marcus said. "Not anymore." Neither did I, though I hadn't known it until he said it aloud. Time passed unnoticed. The daylight shifted, shadows stretching across the floor. At some point, I realized how close we were sitting now, the careful distance gone without either of us acknowledging it. Our knees nearly touched. I could feel his presence in the smallest ways, the warmth of him, the steadiness of his breathing. This was the line, I knew. Not a physical one, but an emotional boundary I had spent years reinforcing. I thought of Ryan, of his trust, of how easily he welcomed people into his life. Guilt rose quickly, sharp and insistent. "I should go," I said, standing too abruptly. Marcus didn't reach for me. He didn't argue. He stood as well, his expression unreadable. That restraint made leaving harder, not easier. "I don't want to complicate things," he said quietly. "Especially not for you." The honesty in his voice disarmed me. I realized then that whatever this was, it wasn't careless. It was considered, measured, aware of the risks. That didn't make it safe. It made it more dangerous. When I returned home, Ryan was already there, relaxed and unaware, talking about his day as if nothing had shifted in the world. I responded automatically, nodding at the right moments, laughing when expected. Inside, I felt split, one version of myself still sitting on Marcus's couch, the other pretending nothing had happened. Over the next days, Marcus became harder to ignore. Messages meant for Ryan now included me directly. Invitations were framed casually but carried intent. When we were all together, his attention remained respectful, almost distant, as if he were deliberately giving me space to decide what came next. Ryan noticed the change before I expected him to. Not the cause, but the effect. He asked if I was tired, if something was bothering me. I told him work was stressful. The lie came easily, which unsettled me more than the truth ever had. One evening, as Ryan stepped out to take a call, Marcus met my eyes across the room. The look wasn't urgent or demanding. It was patient. It said he would wait, but not forever. I realized then that the danger wasn't in what had already happened, but in how much I wanted it to continue. Later that night, my phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. Just a few words, nothing incriminating, yet heavy with implication. I stared at the screen longer than necessary, weighing consequences against desire, loyalty against a growing need to be understood. In the next room, Ryan laughed at something on television, unaware that the balance between us had shifted. I knew I was standing at the edge of a choice that would not stay hidden for long. Whatever I did next would ripple outward, touching lives that trusted me not to let go. I typed a reply, then erased it. Typed again. When I finally pressed send, I felt the familiar pull of caution loosen its grip, replaced by something far more uncertain. The calm before me felt temporary, like the pause before a truth insists on being heard. The tension finally broke on a night that began like any other. Ryan cooked dinner, moving easily around the kitchen, unaware that every sound felt amplified to me. Marcus arrived later than usual, quieter, more reserved. The three of us sat together, sharing food and conversation that stayed stubbornly on the surface. Beneath it, something strained, pulling tight with every passing minute. I noticed first how Ryan watched Marcus when he thought no one was looking. Not with suspicion exactly, but with a dawning awareness that something had shifted beyond his control. When Marcus laughed, Ryan's smile lingered a fraction too long, as if he were searching for reassurance and not finding it. After dinner, Ryan excused himself to take a call in the bedroom. The door closed softly behind him, leaving Marcus and me alone in the living room once more. The silence returned, heavier than before. "This can't keep going like this," Marcus said quietly. I nodded, already knowing what he meant. The unspoken had grown too loud. Every look, every pause, every careful avoidance had built toward this moment. "I never wanted to hurt him," Marcus continued. "Or you." "You already are," I said, not accusing, just stating what we both felt. Ryan returned sooner than expected. He stood in the doorway, phone forgotten in his hand, eyes moving between us. The room held its breath. "Is there something I should know?" Ryan asked. The question was simple, but it carried the weight of trust, of years shared, of a bond one had never intended to fracture. I looked at Marcus, then back at my brother. For the first time, I didn't try to hide. "I should have said something sooner," I replied. My voice didn't shake, though everything else did. I didn't plan for it to happen. But it did. Ryan's expression tightened, confusion giving way to hurt. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse. That restraint hurt more than anger would have. "So it's true," he said quietly. Marcus stepped forward, stopping at a respectful distance. "Nothing happened the way you're imagining," he said. "But feelings did. And that's on me too." Ryan exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "I trusted you," he said, first to Marcus, then to me. "Both of you." The words landed heavily, settling into places I hadn't known were exposed. I wanted to explain myself, to justify emotions that had grown without permission, but there were no explanations that wouldn't sound like excuses. "I need some space," Ryan said finally. "From both of you." Marcus nodded immediately. He didn't argue or defend himself. He picked up his jacket, his movements deliberate and calm, as if he were trying to preserve what little dignity the situation still allowed. "I'm sorry," he said to Ryan. "For crossing a line I shouldn't have approached." Then he looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Take care of yourself." The door closed behind him, softer than I expected. Ryan sat down heavily on the couch, staring at the floor. I wanted to sit beside him, to bridge the distance, but I knew proximity wasn't what he needed. "I never meant to betray you," I said. "I know," Ryan replied after a long pause. "That doesn't make it easier." Days passed with an uncomfortable quiet settling over the apartment. Marcus didn't return. His messages stopped, not abruptly, but with a clear finality. Ryan and I moved around each other carefully, relearning how to share space without pretending nothing had changed. One evening, Ryan spoke first. "I don't hate you," he said. "I just need time to understand where I stand now." I nodded, grateful for his honesty, aware that healing didn't follow schedules or promises. Later that night, alone in my room, I thought about Marcus's apartment, about the calm he had created for himself, about the part of me that had felt most understood there. I realized that what hurt most wasn't losing him, but recognizing how briefly I had allowed myself to be fully seen. Some stories end with closure. Mine ended with clarity. I understood now that desire doesn't excuse silence, and that love, of any kind, demands responsibility. I didn't know what would come next, only that I couldn't return to the version of myself who believed staying quiet kept everyone safe. As the apartment settled into sleep, I lay awake, aware that this chapter had ended but another was already beginning, shaped by truths I could no longer ignore.